Have you ever said goodbye to someone, expecting to see them the next day, only for them to vanish without a trace? What would you do if your entire family disappeared overnight while you were away? How far would you go to find them? And what terrible secrets might you uncover along the way? This is the story of Titus Mercer, who kissed his wife and children goodbye on a rainy Tuesday evening, promising to return the following night. It was an ordinary goodbye on an ordinary day. He had no way of knowing it would be the last time he'd ever see them. Rain tapped against the windows like tiny fingers as Titus Mercer zipped his overnight bag. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast warm shadows across the room he shared with Imani for the past 11 years. "Do you have your phone charger?" Imani asked, folding a pair of socks and handing them to him. Her dark curls were pulled back in a messy bun, the way she always wore her hair on Tuesday nights. "Got it," Titus said, patting his jacket pocket. "And my presentation notes, extra tie, and those mints you insist I take to meetings." Imani smiled. "Your breath gets scary when you're nervous." From downstairs came the sound of cartoons and children's laughter. "Daddy, you can't leave yet!" Zola's voice carried up the stairs. At 9 years old, she had mastered the art of making demands sound like emergencies. Titus checked his watch. "I've got 10 minutes before I need to hit the road." He grabbed his bag and followed Imani downstairs to the living room, where their children had built a fort out of couch cushions and blankets. 6-year-old Caleb peeked out from the blanket doorway, his glasses slightly crooked on his small face. "Is it time already?" "Almost, buddy." Titus knelt down. "Business meetings are boring anyway. You're having much more fun here in Fort Awesome." "Fort Spectacular," Zola corrected, emerging with her wild hair full of static. "We upgraded." "My mistake." Titus bowed dramatically. "Fort Spectacular is clearly superior." Caleb crawled out and wrapped his arms around Titus's neck. "Will you be back for Pancake Day?" "I wouldn't miss Thursday pancakes. I'll be back tomorrow night, and then it's just one sleep until pancake morning." Titus breathed in the scent of his son's shampoo, apple-scented, because Caleb insisted it made him smell like pie. Imani moved toward the kitchen. "Kids, say proper goodbyes while I pack Daddy a snack for the road." Zola stood and placed her hands on Titus's shoulders. "Dad, I need you to know something important." Titus matched her serious tone. "What is it, Zoe?" "Ms. Parker is giving us our science project assignment tomorrow, and if it's about space, like she hinted, I'm going to need supplies." She lowered her voice dramatically. "The expensive kind from the craft store." Titus tried not to laugh. "I see. And this is urgent. Because? Because Tyler Chen always has the best supplies, and I need mine to be better." "Ah, the Tyler Chen rivalry continues." Titus nodded solemnly. "I'll bring home something special for any science project, space or otherwise." Zola grinned, satisfied, then hugged him tightly. "Don't let the business people be mean to you." "They wouldn't dare," Titus replied, kissing the top of her head. Caleb tugged on his sleeve. "Will you call before bedtime?" "Wild horses couldn't stop me." Imani returned with a brown paper bag. "Turkey sandwich, apple, and those chocolate chip cookies my mom brought over yesterday." Titus raised an eyebrow. "You're sharing your mom's cookies? Now I know you love me." "Don't push it," Imani said with a smile. She reached up to straighten his collar. "Text me when you get to the hotel." "Always do." He leaned in and kissed her, ignoring the exaggerated groans of disgust from the children. Outside, the rain had picked up. Titus jogged to his car, tossing his bag and the lunch into the passenger seat. Through the front window, he could see his family watching. Imani with her hand raised, Zola waving wildly, and Caleb jumping up and down. Normal, perfect. He honked, twice as he pulled away, their special goodbye signal. Imani closed the front door as Titus's taillights disappeared around the corner. All right, homework time before dinner. But the fort, Caleb began. We'll still be there after homework, Imani finished. Math first, then we can make those chicken nuggets you like. The evening routine unfolded as it always did on Titus's business trip nights. Homework at the kitchen table, with Imani helping. Caleb sound out words for his reading log, while Zola tackled multiplication tables. Dinner with extra ketchup for the nuggets. Bath time with too many bubbles that somehow ended up on the bathroom ceiling. As Imani tucked Caleb into bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Titus. Checked in. Room smells like air freshener trying to hide something worse. She smiled and typed back, better than last time's mysterious stain saga. Later, as promised, Titus called. Imani put him on speakerphone in Zola's room first. Did you see any famous people at your hotel? Zola asked. The same question she always asked. Well, Titus lowered his voice conspiratorially. I'm pretty sure. The guy who delivers room service is secretly a superhero. His name tag said Doug, but he had that look, you know? Zola giggled. You always say that. Because hotels are where superheroes hide, obviously. After saying goodnight to Zola, Imani carried the phone to Caleb's room, where he was already half asleep. Good night, Dad, he mumbled. Don't forget Pancake Day. Never, Titus promised. Sleep tight, buddy. Downstairs again, Imani curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, phone pressed to her ear. The house feels emptier when you're not here, she said. I'll be home before you know it, Titus replied. How's that research thing you've been working on? Imani paused. Getting interesting. We'll talk about it tomorrow. They chatted about ordinary things, bills to pay, Zola's upcoming dentist, appointment, whether the washing machine was making that strange noise again. When they finally said goodnight, neither knew it would be their last normal conversation. After locking up, Imani stood for a moment in the living room, looking at the family photo above the fireplace. Then she turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed, unaware that in less than 12 hours, their lives would shatter like glass. Titus whistled as he turned onto Maple Street, his meeting having gone better than expected. The quarterly reports had impressed the regional manager, and for once, the 6-hour drive home felt worth it. He'd stopped at Caleb's favorite candy shop and bought Zola that star-shaped glitter glue she'd been asking for. A small apology for being away, even though it was just for one night. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the familiar houses of their neighborhood. Mrs. Henley was watering her prize roses. The Rodriguez twins raced their bikes along the sidewalk. Everything was exactly as it should be. Titus pulled into his driveway next to Imani's blue minivan. Good, they were home. He'd texted her an hour ago about picking up pizza for dinner, but she hadn't responded, probably busy with the kids. He grabbed his overnight bag and the gifts, then bounded up the porch steps. The house seemed unusually quiet as he unlocked the front door. No television sounds, no piano practice, no squabbling siblings. I'm home, Titus called out, dropping his bag in the entryway. Anybody want to help me eat this pizza before it gets cold? Silence answered him. Imani? Kids? He walked into the living room. The blanket fort from yesterday was still there, but no giggling. Children hid inside. A strange feeling settled in Titus's stomach. Something wasn't right. The house never felt this still. even during nap times when the kids were toddlers. Zoe? Caleb? He took the stairs two at a time, checking their bedrooms. Zola's colorful room was empty, her bed unmade. Stuffed animals sat in their usual spots on her bookshelf. In Caleb's room, Lego pieces were scattered across the floor. A half-finished spaceship abandoned mid-construction. "Imani?" Titus called, his voice growing louder. He checked their bedroom. The covers were rumpled, but no one was there. Back downstairs, Titus noticed details he'd missed in his initial search. Breakfast dishes still sat on the kitchen table. 3 bowls with soggy cereal remains. Half-full glasses of orange juice. A pot of coffee, cold in the machine. His heart began to pound. He pulled out his phone and called Imani's number. From the counter, her phone lit up and buzzed. She never went anywhere without her phone. "This isn't funny." His voice echoed through the empty house. "Imani! Zola! Caleb!" Titus rushed to the backyard. The swing set stood motionless. No footprints crossed the damp grass. Maybe they went to Imani's sister's house. He called Ava, his fingers trembling as he dialed. "Hey, Titus! How was the business trip?" Ava sounded cheerful, normal. "Is Imani with you? And the kids?" Titus asked, his voice tight. A pause. "No. Why would they be? Everything okay?" Titus's knees felt weak. "I don't know where they are. I just got home and the house is empty. Imani's phone is here, but they're gone." "Did you check with the neighbors? Maybe they went to that park Caleb likes?" "I just got here. I haven't—" Titus stopped. On the kitchen counter, partially hidden under a placemat, was a child's drawing. Caleb's distinctive scrawl. A house with 4 stick figures. But one figure, the tallest one, was separated from the others by what looked like a wall or fence. "I'll call you back," he told Ava, ending the call before she could respond. Titus raced next door to the Patel's house and rang the doorbell repeatedly. Mrs. Patel answered, surprise on her face. "Titus, is everything all right? Have you seen Imani? And the kids today?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. She frowned. "No, I haven't. But I was at my daughter's until about an hour ago." "What about this morning? Did you see them leave the house? Was anyone else here?" "I'm sorry. I left early for my yoga class." She peered at him. "Titus, you're scaring me." "What's wrong?" "I don't know," he admitted. "They're not home, and it looks like they left in the middle of breakfast." Mrs. Patel put a hand on his arm. Maybe they had an emergency? A relative in the hospital? But Titus was already heading to the next house, and the next, asking the same desperate questions. No one had seen his family today. Back at home, Titus called Imani's workplace. Her assistant said she had called in sick this morning. The children's school confirmed they hadn't shown up. And yes, someone, presumably Imani, had called them in absent as well. Titus stood in the kitchen, staring at the abandoned breakfast. The cereal had congealed into a paste. The orange juice had separated. Imani's coffee mug had a perfect lipstick print on its rim. He picked up Caleb's bowl, his son's favorite, with cartoon dinosaurs marching around the edge. The spoon was still in it, as if Caleb had just stepped away for a moment and would return any second to finish his breakfast. But the rain-dampened morning newspaper on the porch told a different story. They'd been gone for hours, with shaking hands. Titus dialed 911. "What's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "My family is missing," Titus said, voice breaking. "My wife and 2 children. I was away overnight and came home to an empty house. It's like they vanished in the middle of breakfast." The questions came quickly. How long had they been gone? Any signs of forced entry? Any history of his wife taking the children somewhere without telling him? Any family problems? Titus answered, mechanically, his eyes fixed on the drawing Caleb had made. The stick figure separated from the family. Was it supposed to be him? As darkness fell, police officers filled his home, taking notes and photographs. They looked at him with barely concealed suspicion. The husband was always the first suspect. One officer had whispered to another when they thought Titus couldn't hear. But Titus barely registered their presence. He sat at the kitchen table, holding Zola's hairbrush found under the couch. A few strands of her dark hair still tangled in the bristles. His mind replayed his last conversation with Imani. "We'll talk about it tomorrow," she had said about her research. What research? What had she discovered that was getting interesting? The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking each moment his family remained missing. Each tick reminded him of the terrible truth. He had said goodbye for just one night, but the empty bowls of cereal told a different story. They were gone, and he had no idea why. Detective Yasmin Okafor had seen hundreds of missing persons cases in her 15 years on the force. She knew the first 48 hours were critical. As she stepped into the Mercer home at 9 p.m., she took in every detail with practiced eyes. "Mr. Mercer," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Detective Okafor. I'll be leading the investigation into your family's disappearance." Titus shook her hand numbly. In the 3 hours since he'd called 911, the house had transformed into a crime scene. Officers in uniform moved through the rooms, dusting for fingerprints and taking photographs. His home didn't feel like his anymore. "Please, sit," Detective Okafor gestured to the dining room table, the only space not occupied by police personnel. She pulled out a small recorder. "Do you mind? It helps me remember details." Titus nodded, still clutching Zola's hairbrush. "Walk me through yesterday," she said. From the beginning. Titus described the ordinary goodbye, the phone call before bedtime, the promise to return for Pancake Thursday. His voice cracked when he mentioned the gifts still sitting unopened in the entryway. Detective Okafor nodded, her expression neutral but not unkind. "And your business meeting? Who can verify your whereabouts?" "At least 20 people," Titus said. "The entire regional sales team, plus executives from headquarters. We were in meetings until 10 p.m. Then I had breakfast with our director this morning before driving back. We'll need names and contact information." She handed him a notepad. "For everyone." As Titus wrote, an officer approached with Imani's laptop. "Found it under the bed, Detective." "Was that unusual?" Detective Okafor asked. "For your wife to keep her laptop under the bed?" Titus frowned. "Very. She usually works at the kitchen table or in her home office." "Password protected?" "Yes, but I know it. It's our anniversary." Detective Okafor made a note. "We'll need to examine the contents, emails, search history, documents. Whatever helps find them," Titus said. The questions continued for hours. Were there money problems? Had Imani seemed afraid recently? Any unusual phone calls? Had either of them been unfaithful? Did Imani have friends Titus didn't know about? Each question felt like an accusation. "Mr. Mercer," Detective Okafor said, carefully. "In cases like this, it's often someone close to the family who—" "I didn't hurt them," Titus interrupted, his voice hoarse. "I would never hurt them. They're everything to me." She held his gaze. "I hope that's true, but I need to ask these questions. It's my job to find your family." Past midnight, Titus's parents arrived, having driven 3 hours after hearing the news. His mother engulfed him in a hug that smelled of the same perfume she'd worn all his life. "They'll find them," she whispered fiercely. They have to! Officers continued working through the night. Titus couldn't sleep. He sat on Zola's bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals, scrolling through his phone for recent family photos to give to the police. In every image, they looked happy, normal. There was no sign that anything was wrong. By morning, friends and neighbors had organized search parties. Titus's co-workers took time off to help. Imani's sister Ava arrived with their parents, their faces drawn with worry. I should have known something was wrong, Ava said, pacing the living room. She's been so secretive lately, Titus looked up sharply. Secretive how? Ava hesitated. She's been researching something. She wouldn't tell me what, just that it was important. I thought it was for her work. Detective Okafor, overhearing, joined them. Mrs. Mercer works in public relations, correct? What company? Horizon Communications, Titus replied. They handle PR for several large corporations, including healthcare companies and manufacturers. And have there been any work problems recently? Stress? Conflicts with colleagues? Titus started to say no, but then paused. She mentioned a project was getting complicated, but she didn't seem worried, just focused. As the day progressed, police established a command center in the local community hall. Volunteers gathered to receive search assignments. Titus watched as they spread out across the neighborhood, combing through parks, woods, and abandoned buildings. Helicopters buzzed overhead. News vans lined the street. Titus's face was suddenly everywhere. On local news, on flyers, on social media. The headlines read, "Family vanishes during father's business trip," and "Search intensifies for missing mother and children." By evening, Titus sat in the police station watching footage from traffic cameras near his home. Nothing showed Imani's minivan leaving. Detective Okafor explained they were checking cameras from a wider radius, trying to determine which direction they might have gone if they had gone willingly at all. That thought, the possibility that they hadn't left by choice, kept Titus awake for a second night. He returned home to shower and change clothes, only to find police had sealed off Zola's room with yellow tape. We found something, Detective Okafor explained, meeting him at the door. Fibers that don't match anything in your home. And there's a partial footprint in soil near your back gate that doesn't match your shoes or your wife's. What does that mean? Titus asked, hope and fear warring in his chest. It could mean nothing, she said carefully. Or it could mean someone else was here. The second day of searching ended with no leads. Titus gave another press conference, his voice breaking as he pleaded for information. Please, if anyone has seen my wife and children, contact the police. Imani, if you can hear this, we just want you home. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. On the third day, Titus found himself being led into an interrogation room at the police station. The questions had evolved from, when did you last see them, to, did you and your wife argue frequently? And, do you own any hunting property where a body could be hidden? I'm trying to help, Detective Okafor said, when Titus finally broke down. But I need the whole truth. I've told you everything, Titus insisted, tears streaming down his face. Later that night, alone in his empty house, Titus curled up on Zola's bed, breathing in the fading scent of her strawberry shampoo. He clutched her teddy bear, the one she'd had since she was a baby, and finally allowed himself to sob. Outside, search teams with flashlights moved through the woods behind their house, calling names that echoed unanswered through the darkness. Titus closed his eyes, remembering the last time he'd seen them. Imani's smile, Zola's wild waves, Caleb's crooked glasses. Normal, perfect. Gone. Tomorrow would mark 4 days since his ordinary goodbye had somehow become permanent. 2 weeks passed. The command center at the community hall remained open, but fewer volunteers showed up each day. The news vans had moved on to fresher stories. Detective Okafor still called daily, but her updates grew shorter, carrying less hope. Titus sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through a true crime forum where strangers dissected his family's disappearance. The thread had over 10,000 comments. "The husband always knows more than he's saying." One comment read, "Those poor children. I bet they're buried somewhere in the woods," wrote another. "Classic case. Business trip alibi. Too perfect. Titus Mercer is guilty." He slammed the laptop shut, his hands shaking. When had he become a villain in the eyes of strangers? The hashtag had been trending for 3 days. His phone rang. Imani's mother. "Any news?" she asked, her voice thin and tired. "Nothing yet," Titus replied, the same answer he'd given for 14 days. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably. Since the disappearance, his relationship with Imani's parents had splintered. They didn't accuse him outright, but he felt their suspicion in every conversation. "The police called us again," she finally said. "They asked about problems between you and Imani." Titus's stomach tightened. "There weren't any problems." "That's what we told them." Another long pause. "But Imani did mention you'd been secretive lately." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "Secretive? About what?" "I don't know, Titus. She just said you were working late a lot, taking calls in another room." Titus racked his brain. He'd been preparing for the regional presentation, staying late to perfect his numbers. The private calls had been with his boss, discussing a possible promotion. "That was work," he said. "Nothing more." After the call ended, Titus paced the house, his thoughts racing. Had Imani really been suspicious of him? Was there something he had missed? The doorbell rang. Detective Okafor stood on his porch, accompanied by 2 officers he hadn't seen before. "Mr. Mercer," she said formally, "we need you to come to the station. We have some new information to discuss." At the station, they led him to the same interrogation room. A file folder sat on the table. "We've been examining your wife's phone records," Detective Okafor said, opening the folder. "We found something interesting." She slid a paper across the table. It showed a list of text messages between Imani and Ava from the week before the Fee disappearance. Imani. Something doesn't add up with Titus's work project. Ava. "What do you mean?" Imani. "The numbers he quoted don't match what I found. I'm going to dig deeper." Ava. "You think he's lying?" Imani. "I don't know, but I'm worried." The messages continued, but several were marked deleted, recovered from backup. Titus stared at the paper, his head spinning. "I don't understand." "What work project? What numbers?" "You tell us, Mr. Mercer." Detective Okafor's voice had cooled considerably. "I never lied to Imani about anything," Titus insisted. "There must be some explanation." "There's more," she said, pulling out another document. "Your company recently completed a consulting project for Northlake Manufacturing. Your wife was researching this company extensively. She accessed their environmental compliance records just days before she disappeared." Titus shook his head. "That makes no sense. Why would Imani care about a manufacturing client? Her PR firm doesn't even handle industrial accounts." "Perhaps because Northlake has been flagged by the EPA 3 times in the past year," Detective Okafor suggested. "Or because your presentation contained profit projections that would be impossible unless they were cutting corners on waste disposal." "What?" "No. Titus stood up, then sat back down when one of the officers stepped forward. My presentation was about optimizing their supply chain. It had nothing to do with waste disposal or environmental issues. Detective Okafor studied him. I want to believe you, Mr. Mercer, but right now, you're our primary person of interest in this case. The words hung in the air between them. You think I did something to my own family? Titus whispered. I think you know more than you're telling us, she replied. And until we find evidence that suggests otherwise, we have to consider all possibilities. They released him 3 hours later, after taking fingerprints and a DNA sample. As Titus walked out of the station, reporters swarmed around him. Mr. Mercer, is it true you're now a suspect? Did you have anything to do with your family's disappearance? What do you say to people calling for your arrest? He pushed through the crowd without answering, his vision blurring with tears. At home, his phone was filled with voicemails, friends expressing concern, his boss putting him on paid leave until the situation resolves, his lawyer warning him not to speak to the police without representation. The only person who didn't seem to doubt him was his mother, who arrived with groceries and a fierce determination to stand by her son. This is ridiculous, she said, unpacking food he had no appetite for. Anyone who knows you understands you would never hurt them. But fewer people seemed sure of that each day. That evening, Ava called. I need to see you, she said, her voice tight. Not at your house, somewhere public. They met at a coffee shop across town. Ava looked terrible, with dark circles under her eyes and unwashed hair. I should have told you sooner, she said without preamble. Imani was working on something that scared her. Titus leaned forward. What was it? She wouldn't give me details. She said it was safer if I didn't know. Ava twisted her napkin nervously. But the night before she disappeared, she called me. She said she'd found proof and needed to decide what to do with it. Proof of what? I don't know, Ava admitted. But she mentioned your company and something about children getting sick. Titus felt the room tilt. Children? What children? In a neighborhood called River Point? She said the cancer rates there were 10 times higher than normal, and it had something to do with a factory. North Lake Manufacturing was located just upstream from River Point. Why didn't you tell the police this? Titus demanded. Ava looked away, because part of me wondered if you found out what she was investigating and what? Hurt my own wife and children? Titus's voice rose, causing nearby customers to turn and stare. How could you think that? I don't know what to think anymore, Ava hissed. All I know is my sister and my niece and nephew are gone, and you're the one still here. Titus returned, home to find his front door ajar. Heart pounding, he pushed it open slowly. Nothing seemed disturbed, but an envelope lay on the floor, as if it had been slipped under the door. Inside was a death threat, cut from magazine letters. Murderers deserve to die. As he called Detective Okafor to report the threat, Titus noticed the light blinking on Imani's laptop, which the police had returned after examining it. Acting on impulse, he opened it and entered their anniversary date. The screen unlocked, to reveal a folder he'd never seen before, hidden in a subfolder of tax documents. It was labeled simply, Proof. His hands trembled as he clicked on it. Inside were dozens of files, environmental reports, health statistics, emails Imani had somehow obtained, and photographs of children with bald heads and thin faces undergoing cancer treatments. As Titus scrolled through the files, a terrible realization dawned. Imani hadn't been suspicious of him. She'd been investigating his company's client, and she'd found something devastating. The doorbell rang, making him jump. Detective Okafor stood on his porch, her expression grim. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "we need to talk about what we found in your garage." Titus felt his stomach drop. "My garage? I haven't been in there for days." Detective Okafor gestured to one of the officers behind her. "We received an anonymous tip. When we arrived, your garage door was unlocked." The officer handed her an evidence bag containing a woman's scarf. Even sealed in plastic, Titus recognized it immediately. The blue silk one he'd given Imani for her birthday last year. "This was found stuffed behind some boxes," Detective Okafor said, watching his face carefully. "It has what appears to be blood on it." Titus's legs nearly gave out. "That's Imani's, but I didn't." He stopped, trying to gather his thoughts. "Someone must have planted it there. I just found a death threat pushed under my door." Detective Okafor's expression didn't change. "We'll test the blood, of course, and look for fingerprints other than yours or your wife's." "I was just about to call you," Titus said desperately. "I found something on Imani's laptop, a hidden folder about Northlake Manufacturing. There are documents about illegal chemical dumping and children with cancer. That's what she was investigating." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the detective's face. "Show me." Inside, Titus opened the laptop and navigated to the folder. Detective Okafor leaned over his shoulder, reading the file names: Riverpoint Cancer Cluster, EPA violations, internal memo regarding waste disposal. She murmured, "When did you find this?" "Just now, right before you knocked," Titus said. "This has to be related to their disappearance." Detective Okafor straightened. "We'll need to examine these files, and I still need you to come to the station to make a statement about the scarf." "I'm telling you, someone planted it," Titus insisted. "The same person who slipped that threat under my door." "Let us do our job, Mr. Mercer." Her tone softened slightly. "If someone is setting you up, we'll find out." At the police station, Titus repeated his story while officers went through Imani's files. Hours later, Detective Okafor returned to the interrogation room. "Your wife was thorough," she said, placing a thick folder on the table. "These documents suggest Northlake Manufacturing has been dumping chemicals into groundwater for years, and there's a statistically significant cancer cluster in Riverpoint, particularly among children." "Did Imani contact anyone about this?" Titus asked. "Journalists? Lawyers?" "We're checking her email records," Detective Okafor replied. "But this does open up new possibilities in the investigation." "Someone could have taken them to keep this quiet," Titus said, hope rising in his chest for the first time in weeks. "It's possible," she agreed cautiously. "But we still need to understand why your wife was researching this in the first place, and why she was concerned about your involvement." Back home, under police supervision, Titus dug deeper into Imani's files. He discovered emails between Imani and a contact identified only as RT, discussing the Northlake situation. "These children are dying because of corporate greed," Imani had written. "We need to expose this now." "Be careful," RT had replied. "These people have powerful friends in government. Gather all the evidence first. We only get one chance at this." The last email, sent the morning of their disappearance, chilled Titus to the bone. "Someone knows what we're doing. My husband is away. I'm scared." Titus printed everything and took it to Detective Okafor the next morning. "She wasn't running away from me," he insisted. "She was running from whoever is behind this cover-up." For the first time, Detective Okafor seemed to truly consider the possibility. "We'll need to investigate Northlake more thoroughly," she said, "and identify this RT person." Days passed as the investigation shifted focus. The blood on the scarf turned out to be Imani's type, but the DNA results weren't conclusive. Fingerprints on the garage door didn't match anyone in the system. Meanwhile, Titus's reputation continued to crumble. His boss called to formally terminate his employment, citing the ongoing situation and company reputation concerns. Death threats appeared in his mailbox daily. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. Even his lawyer suggested he consider moving away until things calmed down. Only Detective Okafor still listened to him, though her official position remained that he was a person of interest. "We visited Northlake today," she told him during one of their now regular meetings. "They were surprisingly cooperative, offering full access to their records." "Too cooperative?" Titus asked. "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "Their records were immaculate, suspiciously so, and they've suddenly announced plans for a new state-of-the-art water filtration system." That evening, as Titus sorted through another pile of hate mail, an envelope different from the others caught his eye. Unlike the crude death threats, this was a cream-colored business envelope with no return address. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, with a set of coordinates written on the back in precise handwriting. Titus immediately searched the coordinates online. They pointed to a location in the mountains, about 6 hours away, a remote spot far from any town. Should he tell Detective Okafor? She might prevent him from going, or worse, alert whoever sent the card. If this was connected to Imani's disappearance, he couldn't risk scaring them off. For the first time in weeks, Titus felt a flicker of real hope. Someone was reaching out to him, someone who might know where his family was. That night, he dreamed of Imani standing at the edge of a forest, holding Zola and Caleb by the hands. "Follow the breadcrumbs," she said, her voice distant and echoing. "I left them for you to find." He woke with tears on his face, but determination in his heart. He would go to the coordinates. He would follow whatever trail Imani might have left. As dawn broke, Titus packed a bag with supplies: food, water, a flashlight, a first aid kit. He tucked the playing card carefully into his wallet. Just as he was about to leave, his phone rang. "Detective Okafor, I think we've identified RT," she said without preamble. "Ren Takeda, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. We're trying to locate him now." Titus's heart raced. A journalist. Of course. Imani had been gathering evidence for a story that would expose Northlake. "There's something else," Detective Okafor continued. "We've received lab results from soil samples near the Northlake facility. The contamination levels are significant. These aren't just EPA violations. This is criminal negligence." Titus thought of the children in the photographs, their small bodies fighting cancers caused by chemicals someone had knowingly dumped. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "Thank you for letting me know." Before she could ask questions, he hung up and turned off his phone. He couldn't risk being tracked. At the front door, Titus paused, looking back at the home he'd shared with his family. For the first time, he felt certain that whatever had happened to them wasn't random. It was connected to what Imani had discovered, a truth powerful people wanted to keep hidden. He stepped outside, locking the door behind him. The Queen of Hearts burned in his pocket, like a promise, or a warning. The mountains loomed ahead as Titus drove his car beyond cell service range. 6 hours of driving had given him too much time to think. What if this was a trap? What if he was abandoning the real investigation to chase a false lead? But the alternative? waiting helplessly, while police followed procedures that had failed for weeks, was unthinkable. GPS navigation had stopped working 20 minutes ago. Now he relied on printed directions and the car's compass. The paved road had given way to gravel, then to dirt rutted with potholes that rattled his teeth. "I'm coming," he whispered, as if Imani might somehow hear him. "Just hold on." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road, Titus thought about Detective Okafor. By now, she would have noticed his absence. Would she think he'd run away? Or would she connect his disappearance to the playing card he'd left conspicuously on his kitchen table? He'd been careful to leave other clues too, printouts of Imani's research with key phrases highlighted, the open map on his computer showing the coordinates from the card. He wasn't trying to hide his destination, just his departure. The road narrowed further, barely wide enough for his sedan. Pine trees crowded against both sides, branches scraping against the windows like fingers. Trying to get in, Titus checked the coordinates again. Less than a mile now. When he finally spotted the small clearing, he almost missed it. Just a gap in the trees with what looked like a footpath. He pulled over, killing the engine. The silence was absolute. No traffic noise, no airplanes overhead. Not even the distant hum of civilization that most people never notice until it's gone. Titus grabbed his backpack and flashlight. The coordinates led another quarter-mile into the forest, up a steep ridge. As he climbed, the path became less distinct. Twice he had to check his compass to ensure he was still heading in the right direction. At the top of the ridge, he paused to catch his breath. The valley below was beautiful in the fading light, but he saw no structures, no cabin, no ranger station, nothing man-made at all. Had he misunderstood? Made a mistake? Then he spotted it, just ahead, half hidden by a stand of pines. A small building, its windows dark, its wooden walls weathered to the color of ash. Titus approached cautiously. No vehicles were visible. No smoke rose from the chimney. The place looked abandoned. The front door was unlocked. Titus pushed it open, wincing at the creak of rusted hinges. He shone his flashlight inside, revealing a single room with dust-covered furniture. A table, 2 chairs, a metal-framed bed stripped of bedding. "Hello?" he called. His voice echoed in the empty space. The beam of his flashlight caught something on the far wall that made his heart skip. Photos, newspaper clippings, and maps covered almost the entire surface. In the center was a large aerial photograph of the Northlake manufacturing plant, with red arrows pointing to specific buildings and notations he couldn't read from this. Distance. Titus stepped inside and closed the door behind him. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness, he realized what he was looking at. An investigation board, just like the ones police created for complex cases. Strings connected various documents, creating a web of relationships and evidence. He moved closer, his flashlight illuminating headlines. Unusual cancer rates, puzzle River Point doctors, and Northlake manufacturing reports record profits. There were personnel files with photos of men in suits, executives presumably, and government documents with official stamps and signatures, many sections highlighted in yellow. It was exactly the kind of research Imani had been conducting, but more extensive. This represented months, maybe years of work. In the corner of the room was a small desk. Titus opened its drawer and found notebooks filled with handwritten observations, dates, and times. The most recent entry was dated just 3 days ago. Someone had been here recently. Someone was actively investigating Northlake. As he flipped through one of the notebooks, a child's drawing fluttered to the floor. Titus picked it up, his hands trembling. 4 stick figures drawn in crayon, labeled Daddy, Mommy, Zola, Caleb. "They were here," he whispered, touching the paper as if it might somehow connect him to his children. They were right here. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just about corporate corruption or environmental crimes anymore. This was confirmation that his family's disappearance was directly connected to Northlake Manufacturing. Titus sank into one of the dusty chairs, still clutching the drawing. He felt both vindicated and terrified. He'd been right to suspect a connection, but that meant powerful people with dangerous resources were involved. He returned to the investigation board, studying it more carefully. One document caught his eye, a memo on Northlake letterhead marked Confidential Executive Committee Only. It detailed a containment strategy for dealing with the River Point situation, including funds allocated for neutralizing potential few whistleblowers. Neutralizing. The clinical coldness of the word made his blood run cold. Another document showed a list of names. Families from River Point whose children had been diagnosed with rare cancers. 8 names were crossed out, with notations like settled or relocated beside them. 3 names remained, including one that made Titus gasp out loud. Chen Tyler, age 10. Tyler Chen. The boy Zola had mentioned, her classroom rival with the good science projects. The connection was undeniable now. Titus took photos of everything with his phone. Even without cell service, the camera still worked. He needed evidence, proof to take back to Detective Okafor. As he photographed the last document, he noticed something he'd missed before. A small, handwritten note tucked into the corner of the board, RT, Cabin 3, Bear Creek Lodge. Emergency only. RT Ren Takeda, the journalist who had been working with Imani. Titus pocketed the note and continued searching the cabin. Under the bed, he found a metal box containing more files, a voice recorder, and several USB drives. He was about to open one of the files when headlights swept across the window. A vehicle was coming up the path. Titus quickly turned off his flashlight and peered through a gap in the dusty curtains. A black SUV with tinted windows had stopped about 50 yards from the cabin. 2 men in dark clothing emerged, one carrying what looked unmistakably like a gun. His heart hammering, Titus grabbed his backpack and stuffed it with as many documents as he could, including the notebooks and USB drives. He looked frantically for a back door, but there was none. Just a small window opposite the entrance. The men were approaching slowly, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Titus forced the window open and squeezed through, dropping to the ground outside just as he heard the front door creak open. "Check everything," a gruff voice ordered. "Make sure nothing's been disturbed." Crouching low, Titus circled around the cabin toward the path where he'd left his car. He froze when a third man emerged from the SUV, standing guard beside it. He couldn't go back that way. Deeper into the woods, then. Titus moved as quietly as possible, using trees for cover. When he judged he was far enough away, he broke into a run, ignoring branches that whipped at his face and roots that threatened to trip him. Behind him, he heard shouts. They'd discovered the open window. They knew someone had been there. Titus ran until his lungs burned, until he couldn't hear the men anymore. He paused, gasping for breath, trying to orient himself. The forest was pitch black now, his flashlight useless if he wanted to remain hidden. Checking his compass, he struck out on a course parallel to the road, hoping to reach his car from a different direction. The hike back down the ridge in darkness was treacherous. Twice he stumbled and fell, the second time sliding several feet down a muddy slope. When he finally spotted his car through the trees, he nearly wept with relief. But as he drew closer, his heart sank. The black SUV was parked behind it, and a man with a flashlight was circling his sedan, peering inside. Titus retreated into the trees. He couldn't go back to his car. He was stranded in the mountains, miles from civilization, with men carrying guns searching for him. For the first time since beginning this journey, he questioned his decision to come alone. But there was no going back now. Clutching the backpack full of evidence, Titus turned and headed deeper into the forest, guided only by his compass and the knowledge that somewhere ahead lay Bear Creek Lodge, and possibly the man who could help him find his family. Dawn broke with Titus still walking. His clothes were torn, his hands scratched, and exhaustion weighed on him like a physical burden. Without a trail to follow, he'd navigated by keeping a small creek on his right, assuming it would eventually lead to the Bear Creek his destination was named after. The gamble paid off as the trees thinned and revealed a cluster of rustic cabins nestled beside a larger stream. A wooden sign confirmed he'd reached Bear Creek Lodge. Titus hung back, watching from the cover of the forest. The place seemed deserted. No cars in the small parking area, no smoke from chimneys, no movement, but appearances had proven dangerous before. He circled the property cautiously until he spotted cabin number 3, set apart from the others at the edge of the woods. Its windows were dark, curtains drawn. Taking a deep breath, Titus approached and knocked softly. No answer. He tried again, louder. The door swung open suddenly, revealing a compact Japanese man in his 40s with a 3-day beard and intense eyes that widened at the sight of Titus. "You shouldn't be here," the man said, glancing past Titus toward the trees. "Are you Ren Takeda?" Titus asked, his voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. The man didn't answer, but the flash of recognition in his eyes was confirmation enough. "I'm Titus Mercer," he continued. "My wife Imani was working with you. She's missing, along with my children. Please, I need your help." Takeda hesitated only a moment before pulling Titus inside and locking the door behind him. The cabin's interior was spartanly furnished but filled with technology: laptops, external hard drives, a satellite phone, and more equipment Titus didn't recognize. "How did you find me?" Takeda demanded. Titus shrugged off his backpack. "Coordinates on a playing card led me to a cabin in the mountains. I found a note with your location there." Alarm flashed across Takeda's face. "You were at the research station? When?" "Last night. Men with guns showed up. I barely escaped." Takeda cursed under his breath. "Did they see you?" "Follow you." "I don't think so. I abandoned my car and walked all night." Takeda seemed to make a decision. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit. You look ready to collapse." He brought Titus water and some beef jerky, which Titus consumed gratefully. Only after his most immediate needs were addressed did Takeda speak again. "I've been expecting someone to find me," he said quietly. "But I thought it would be them, not you." "Them? North Lake's people?" Takeda nodded. "They've been trying to shut down our investigation for months. Bribes first, then threats, and now—" He trailed off, his expression grim. "Now they've taken my family," Titus finished for him. "Where are they? Are they alive?" Takeda held up his hands. "It's complicated. I've been working with your wife since January. She contacted me after noticing patterns in confidential data her PR firm handled, unusually high medical benefits claims from one specific client, all involving childhood cancer treatments." "North Lake," Titus said. "Yes." She tracked it back to River Point, where the company had been dumping chemical byproducts into the groundwater for years. Imani gathered initial evidence, then reached out to me because of my previous work exposing corporate environmental crimes. Titus shook his head in disbelief. She never told me any of this. She was protecting you, Takeda said. The less you knew, the safer you were. We've been documenting everything: illegal dumping, the cancer cluster, the cover-up involving local officials. We were weeks away from publishing a major expose that would have destroyed Northlake and sent several executives to prison. But they found out, Titus guessed. Someone leaked information. We still don't know who. Takeda's face darkened. The night you were away on business, Imani received a warning, a direct threat against your children. Titus felt his stomach lurch. What kind of threat? A message with photos of Zola and Caleb at school, along with details about their daily routines. It was clear: stop the investigation, or the children would suffer. So she ran, Titus whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. She had no choice, Takeda said. She couldn't risk your children's safety, but she also couldn't destroy the evidence we'd gathered. Not when so many lives were at stake. Why didn't she tell me? I could have helped. We could have gone to the police together. The threat specifically warned against involving authorities, Takeda explained. And several police officers in your county are on Northlake's payroll. Imani didn't know who to trust. Titus ran his hands through his hair in frustration. Where is she now? Where are my children? Takeda hesitated. I arranged for them to go into hiding. A contact of mine, someone with federal connections, helped create new identities for them. Federal connections? Like witness protection? Not officially, Takeda admitted. More of an unofficial arrangement while we build the case. But I lost contact with them a week ago. The plan was for them to check in every 3 days using a secure line. Fear clutched at Titus's heart. What happened? Were they caught? I don't know, Takeda said, his voice betraying worry for the first time. It could be nothing. Maybe they had to move locations and couldn't communicate safely. Or Northlake found them, Titus finished, the words like poison on his tongue. Takeda nodded grimly. I've been trying to track them down without exposing myself. That's why I sent you the card with the coordinates. I needed someone I could trust to retrieve the backup evidence from the research station. Wait, Titus said, confused. You sent the card? How did you know where I lived? I didn't send any card, Takeda said, his expression changing to alarm. What exactly did this card look like? A Queen of Hearts, with coordinates written on the back. Takeda stood abruptly. We need to leave. Now. The Queen of Hearts is Northlake's calling card. Their security chief is a former intelligence operative who uses playing cards as signatures. They led you to the research station to see who was connected to the investigation. And I led them straight to you, Titus realized with horror. Pack only what you need, Takeda ordered, already gathering equipment. We have maybe 20 minutes before they track you here. As they hurriedly collected essential evidence and supplies, Takeda explained more about the case they'd built. Chemicals called PFAS, forever chemicals that never break down, had been dumped in massive quantities, contaminating River Point's water supply. Children, with their developing bodies, were most vulnerable. Northlake knew, Takeda said bitterly. Internal documents prove they've known for years, but calculated it was cheaper to pay occasional settlements than properly dispose of the waste. Those children, Titus said, thinking of the photos he'd seen in Imani's files. All those sick children. They were almost ready to leave when the satellite phone rang. Takeda answered cautiously, his face showing surprise, then relief. It's for you, he said, handing the phone to Titus. "Hello?" Titus said. "Mr. Mercer." The voice belonged to Detective Okafor. "You've led us on quite a chase." "How did you find you? I've been tracking your case more closely than you realize. When you disappeared, I contacted some federal colleagues. Environmental crimes aren't just local matters." Titus felt a wave of hope. "My family is alive," Detective Okafor cut in, "but in a very precarious situation. We need to move quickly. Armed men are currently searching the woods near your location." "She's right," Takeda confirmed, looking out the window. "I can see vehicles approaching from the main road." Titus gripped the phone tighter. "Tell me what to do." "There's a service road behind the cabins," Detective Okafor instructed. "A ranger will be there in an unmarked vehicle in 5 minutes. He'll get you to safety." True to her word, they escaped just as black SUVs pulled into the lodge entrance. As they sped away in the ranger's truck, Titus looked back to see men in tactical gear swarming Cabin 3. "We have federal agents moving on North Lake Manufacturing as we speak," Detective Okafor explained when they reached a secure location hours later. "Search warrants are being executed and several executives are already in custody." "And my family?" Titus asked, the question that had consumed him for weeks. Detective Okafor's expression turned grave. "That's more complicated. The threats against them were real, Mr. Mercer. Very real." 1 year later, Titus stood in front of a small apartment building, keys in hand. The place was nothing like the home he'd shared with Imani and the children, but it was safe. A fresh start in a city where nobody knew his name or his story. The North Lake case had made national headlines. 8 executives now faced federal charges for environmental crimes. The company had been forced to establish a billion-dollar fund for the affected families in River Point. Class action lawsuits were ongoing. Titus had testified before a grand jury about what he'd discovered, presenting the evidence he and Takeda had salvaged. His name had been cleared, his reputation restored. Local police had issued a formal apology for considering him a suspect. But none of that mattered, because despite the case breaking wide open, despite justice being served, Titus still came home to empty rooms each night. In the months following his escape from the mountains, he'd learned the full truth from Detective Okafor. Imani and the children had been placed in an unofficial witness protection program, hidden away until the federal case against North Lake could be built. But the danger hadn't passed with the arrests. Too many powerful people remained connected to North Lake. Politicians, judges, business leaders who had profited from the company's crimes. "As long as these people remain at large, your family will never be truly safe," Detective Okafor had explained, especially with the children being able to identify some of the individuals involved. Titus had spent the past year chasing every possible lead, using his savings to travel across the country, following rumors and whispers. Each time, he arrived too late. His family had been moved again, their trail deliberately obscured by the very people trying to protect them. Today marked the anniversary of their disappearance. Titus had returned to his old house, now owned by a young couple with a baby. They'd been kind enough to let him stand in the driveway for a few minutes, remembering. Out of habit, he'd checked the mailbox on his way out, something he still did. Occasionally, though, his mail was forwarded to a P.O. box in another city. Inside had been a single playing card, the King of Hearts. On the back, a phone number. Now, hours later, Titus sat in his car outside a small diner off the highway, the card turning over and over in his fingers. He'd called the number immediately. A computerized voice had given him this address and a time, 7 p.m. It was 6:58, heart-pounding. Titus got out of his car and walked toward the diner's entrance. Through the windows, He could see a Friday night crowd. Truckers, local families, teenagers sharing milkshakes. He scanned the booths, looking for familiar faces. In the far corner, a woman sat alone, her back to the door. Dark curls, the slope of her shoulders. For a moment, Titus couldn't breathe. Imani? He pushed through the door, weaving between tables, hope blooming in his chest for the first time in a year. The woman must have heard him approaching. She turned. It wasn't Imani. Detective Okafor looked up at him, her eyes carrying a weight he'd come to recognize. "Mr. Mercer," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." The hope inside him crumbled. He slid into the booth across from her. "You," he said flatly. I know what you thought," she interrupted gently. "I'm sorry." Titus closed his eyes briefly. Why the secrecy? The playing card? Why not just call me? Some conversations shouldn't happen over phones, even supposedly secure ones. She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. What I'm about to tell you goes against every protocol. It could end my career. Titus leaned forward. "Tell me what?" Detective Okafor met his gaze directly. "They're alive, Titus. All of them." His heart stuttered. "I know that. You've told me before. What I haven't told you," she continued, "is that they will never come back. Not to you. Not to their old lives." The words hit him like physical blows. "What are you saying?" "Their safety depends on the world believing they're dead, including you." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is the only message you'll ever receive from them." Titus stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. "I don't understand." "The people behind Northlake are powerful and patient. As long as they believe your family might someday testify against them, they'll never stop hunting. The only way to truly protect Imani and your children was to create new identities so deep that even I don't know their new names or location." "You're saying I can never see them again," Titus whispered. "That's not protection. That's torture." "It was Imani's choice," Detective Okafor said softly. She knew what continuing the investigation would cost. She chose to sacrifice her old life to protect your children and help all those other families. Titus finally took the envelope with trembling hands. "How do I know this isn't another trick? Another trap?" "Open it," she said simply. Inside was a photograph. Imani, Zola, and Caleb stood on a beach he didn't recognize, squinting in bright sunlight. Zola looked taller, her wild hair tied back. Caleb's glasses were different, blue frames instead of red. They were holding a newspaper, its date clearly visible in the corner. 1 week ago. They were alive. They were safe. They were gone. "This isn't fair," Titus said, his voice breaking as he traced their faces with his fingertip. "No," Detective Okafor agreed. "It's not, but it's the only way." She stood to leave, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. "For what it's worth, she never doubted you. Not for a second." Titus remained in the booth long after she'd gone, staring at the photograph that was both a gift and a wound. His family, forever beyond his reach. He thought of all the ordinary moments he'd taken for granted, Zola's science projects, Caleb's bedtime stories, Imani's smile across the dinner table. An ordinary goodbye on a rainy Tuesday evening. He'd said goodbye for one night. They'd never return, but they were alive. And in the end, that had to be enough. That was the end of this story. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting content like this. Don't forget to share with your friends and family to spread kindness and awareness. Until next time.